Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and many people are starting to say that it's becoming more and more of a buyer's market when it comes to the retro game collecting scene, buying video games, and being able to build a collection. A lot of that is coming from a few places. One, waning interest in retro game collecting. But I think more than anything else, the economy is probably the biggest factor. The fact that most folks don't have the disposable income to purchase retro games and indulge in a hobby that's really somewhat of a luxury. It's something that's becoming more and more rare to see people indulge in as times get harder. And then even on the reseller front, what you're starting to see is you're not seeing as many small transactions from resellers. I think where you're seeing a lot of resellers head, the direction that they're heading in, is if you're a reseller and you've been able to survive up to this point, most of those folks are buying large collections. They're not even messing with the onesie twosies. They're not meeting up at random times of the day to buy, a stack of games. Or, I mean, maybe they will if they've got the time for it. But most of the larger resellers who are really trying to build a reselling business and aren't really just doing it as a hobby, most of those folks are buying entire collections, buying entire video game stores, and they're doing it at a rate where they're able to get games at nearly 75% off, somewhere between 75 and 60% off, which is understandable because if you're buying an entire video game store, or if you're buying someone's collection that's valued at $250,000, you can never really expect someone who's buying all of that from you at one time to pay you, 60, 70% of that. No, you'd be lucky if someone's willing to pay you half of what a collection that goes for $250,000 is worth. So you're seeing more heavy hitting, more established resellers start to spend more money on these larger collections. And the reason why I think is because of a few places. One of the things that are, one of the channels that I think a lot of resellers are leveraging is Whatnot. And what a lot of resellers aren't saying is that Whatnot isn't really a huge moneymaker. Whatnot isn't a place that is allowing resellers to get top dollar for these games that they're reselling. Whatnot is a place that I think a lot of resellers go to get fast money when they've spent a lot of cash on collections. So what do I mean? If you're a reseller and you spent $25,000 on a large collection, they're probably gonna buy the collection, and then they're probably gonna break it down into a few groups. On one group, you'll have all of the games that will do well on Amazon. In another group, you'll have a bunch of games that will probably do well on eBay. In another group, you might use that group for maybe trade bait or local deals, or maybe you might set that aside for conventions. And then most, resellers, if they're smart, they have another bunch or stack that's pretty much dedicated to Whatnot. And the way they leverage Whatnot is, they're going to use Whatnot to try to recoup as much of that fast cash as they possibly can, to recoup that money, right? Because they know that Amazon might not be the fastest route to sell items. eBay is probably the slowest route. And then conventions only happen a few times a year. So for a lot of sellers, speed is important for a lot of resellers. Being able to get rid of, some of these games as fast as possible to recoup cash is huge, because running a business is a big part of running a business is maintaining cash flow. So this is where you'll see a lot of these resellers, they'll host these Whatnot events, and they will, maybe post half of that $25 collection on Whatnot and try to sell as much of those games on Whatnot as possible. But let's just say that $25,000 they spent, the $25,000 that they spent on that collection was for a collection that was worth, I don't know, let's say $75,000, well, then, I mean, they're probably going to see if they can get $25,000 via Whatnot. And so they'll probably sell the lower rung of games, the lower tier games, and auction those off on Whatnot. They're not going to take, like a complete in box copy of, Super Metroid, or a complete in box copy of, you know, Chrono Trigger, and do that on Whatnot, because in most cases they're losing money on Whatnot. Whatnot is a place where you go to sell games fast, not where you go to maximize dollars. And it's kind of the best strategy that I could say if you're a reseller, because buying games in bulk allows you to get the really good stuff for cheap. The trick is, though, is in being able to recoup the money you spent through Whatnot. And then essentially you got all of the good games for free. You got all of the higher tier games, the complete in box stuff, the limited stuff. You got all that stuff for free if you were able to recoup your money through Whatnot by selling the bottom, I don't know, 30% of games, in terms of games that don't have as much value. And I think this is the strategy that a lot of resellers are using, which in turn, I think, is driving down the price of some of those lower tier games. And by lower tier games, I'm not saying that the games aren't good games. They could be fun games, but they're probably games that are maybe worth maybe $30 and under. And so what this means, in my opinion, is that it is becoming a buyer's market for certain types of games, I think. And that kind of plays into where you're at in your collecting journey. So if you're someone who already has a built up and established collection, you have a lot of the games that you want, you're not, starting from scratch, odds are that a lot of the games that you want to add to your collection are probably more rare, more limited, more expensive. They're going to be more collector pieces than anything else. If you find yourself in that category, then it probably doesn't feel as much like a buyer's market to you. It probably still feels the same way it felt maybe 2 or 3 years ago, because the price of some of these more expensive games are exactly the same. And in some cases, they've gone up, right? And even if they've gone down, they haven't significantly gone down. So if a copy of Blood Will Tell was $480 back in 2021, even if it's like $425 or $450, that's still not a significant enough price drop for you to consider it like, okay, now that's an easy game to get. It's still highly expensive for a video game. But on the flip side of that coin, if you're someone who's building a collection from scratch, you're just starting out, and maybe you're adding games that are in that 30 and under price range, well, yeah, it's definitely becoming more of a buyer's market for you, because a lot of those games that fall in that category are a lot more easy to attain, and they're less expensive than they were a few years ago. A lot of those games that were $50, $40 have now dropped down to 20, $25. And with, more of these games being re-released on consoles like the Switch and stuff, some of these prices are dropping down even further. And so I would say that it's definitely a buyer's market for someone who's looking to start a collection and buy some of those staple collection pieces for that anyone who has like a large enough game collection will want to have. So if you're looking for games like the Kingdom Hearts series, if you're looking for, Super Mario World and Mario All Stars, you're looking for some of those like classic Super Nintendo games. If you're looking for some of those basic PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games, like the God of War games, the Jak and Daxter games, Max Payne, games like that, you can clean house. You could spend $100 and walk away with a solid starter kit of really quality games, because I think this is one of those markets where you're going to be able to find that stuff a lot easier and a lot cheaper. But it is not, I still don't think it is a buyer's market for collectors. I think collectors, if you're a collector and you're looking for specialty games, rare games, it still feels the same to a degree. But I'm interested to know your thoughts. You guys let me know what you think down in the comments. I'll catch you in the next one. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.